Now, you gotta understand something about Elias Thorne. He wasn't just rich. He was the kind of rich that made other billionaires feel like they were running a lemonade stand. We're talking about the man who inherited Thorne Industries, a giant tech conglomerate built on logistics and absolute flawless efficiency. Elias. He didn't just run the company. He was the company. And his personal life? It mirrored the spreadsheet perfectly. Everything was optimized. Everything was cold. His primary residence was a skyscraper penthouse in Manhattan. But the real headquarters of his private life was the Preserve, a sprawling, hypermodern estate carved into the rolling hills of upstate New York. It was less a home and more a fortress of solitude and stainless steel. Elias liked things to run like a Swiss watch dipped in liquid gold. He had a staff of 50 just for the Preserve, but there was one person, one quiet, steady engine, who kept the whole machine from grinding itself to dust. That was Clara Ramirez. Clara had been with the Thorne family since Elias was a teenager. She was the executive housekeeper, though that title barely covered it. She knew where the emergency generator fuse box was. She knew exactly which temperature Elias liked his imported sparkling water, 41 degrees Fahrenheit, no ice. And she knew how to make the entire estate invisible. If Clara was there, you never saw a speck of dust, you never smelled a stale room, and you never heard the staff arguing. She was the ghost in the machine, the ultimate professional. But even the most perfect machine eventually hits a snag. Clara wasn't just serving the Thorne empire. She had a life, a real, painful, complicated life, miles away in a small, cramped apartment in Queens. Her mother, who had been battling lung disease for years, had taken a sudden, sharp turn for the worse. The doctors were talking about palliative care, about hospice, about the kind of terrible choices you never want to make. Clara was a rock, but this was too heavy even for her. She had been pulling double shifts, working 16 hours a day, driving back and forth, trying to manage the looming tragedy while ensuring Elias's bespoke Italian loafers were always polished to a mirror sheen. Finally, late on a Tuesday afternoon, trembling slightly, she printed out the official Thorne Industries request for extended leave form. It was a sterile, unforgiving document requiring 3 different managerial signatures and a notarized explanation of the emergency. Clara filled it out meticulously. She requested 2 weeks. 2 simple weeks of unpaid leave to be with her dying mother. She attached the doctor's note, official and detailed, explaining the critical nature of the situation. She signed it, folded it neatly, and placed it on the mahogany desk of Mr. Harrison, Elias's chief of staff, who was supposed to be the first bottleneck. Now, Harrison, he was a decent guy. He knew Clara was irreplaceable. He looked at the paperwork, saw the doctor's prognosis, and his stomach dropped. He knew this was serious. He signed his approval immediately, adding a handwritten note. Essential staff. Urgent need. Highly recommend approval. Then the packet went up the chain, eventually landing on the pristine, uncluttered, white glass desk of Elias Thorne himself. Elias was having a bad week. Not bad, like losing a loved one or struggling to pay rent. His kind of bad meant the launch of the new Thorne AI assistant had hit a coding snag, delaying the rollout by 48 hours, and his private chef had dared to use sea salt instead of Himalayan pink salt on his morning eggs. He was sitting in his climate-controlled office, overlooking the Hudson River, reviewing quarterly reports, when his personal assistant, a nervous woman named Bethany, placed a thin folder on his desk. Mr. Thorne, this is a leave request from the head housekeeper, Ms. Ramirez, Bethany whispered, already bracing for impact. Elias didn't even look up. He was staring at a graph showing a 0.03% dip in market share. Ramirez, the one who manages the Preserve, he asked, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. Yes, sir. She's requesting 2 weeks. Her mother is critically ill. Elias finally picked up the folder. He didn't read the doctor's note. He didn't look at Harrison's recommendation. His eyes went straight to the dates. 2 weeks. He leaned back in his Italian leather chair, the kind that cost more than most people's annual income. He let out a slow, irritated sigh, the sound of pure corporate inconvenience. 2 weeks, he repeated, as if the number itself was offensive. Do you understand what happens at the preserve when she is gone, Bethany? Bethany shifted her weight. Well, sir, she runs the entire operation. The secondary staff relies on her schedules. She manages inventory, supplies, and security protocols. Exactly. She is a critical node in the logistical chain of my personal life. And she wants to break that chain because of family matters. Elias's tone suggested that family matters ranked somewhere below traffic jam in terms of legitimate excuses. He picked up a heavy, engraved letter opener. He tapped the form once, right over Clara's signature. Bethany, we pay her a premium. We provide housing and benefits that far exceed the standard for her industry. In return, I expect uninterrupted service. This is a contractual obligation. Her personal life is not my logistical problem. Bethany tried one last time, her voice barely audible. Sir, Mr. Harrison noted that she hasn't taken a sick day or personal leave in 7 years. She's exceptionally dedicated. Elias stopped tapping. He looked at Bethany, his eyes like chips of ice. Dedication is mandatory, Bethany. It is not grounds for special treatment. It simply means she has been performing the job she was hired for. If she leaves for 2 weeks, the entire system degrades. Who restocks the wine cellar? Who calibrates the smart home temperature sensors? Who ensures the security rotation is flawless? I cannot tolerate operational slippage due to sentimentality. He didn't tear it neatly. He didn't crumple it. Elias Thorne, the man who moved billions with a click of a mouse, performed a deliberate act of destruction. With slow, precise movements, he ripped the thick paper into 4 perfect quadrants. Then he ripped those 4 into 8 smaller pieces. He then slid the shredded remains toward Bethany. Tell Harrison to inform Ramirez that her request is denied. If she fails to report for her shift tomorrow morning, she will be considered to have abandoned her post. Termination will be immediate. She can deal with her family crisis on her own time, provided it does not interfere with mine. Bethany swallowed hard. She gathered the confetti of cruelty and retreated, feeling sick. She knew that Elias had just signed Clara's dismissal notice, but she also felt deep down that he had just signed something else, something much bigger. The news traveled fast, not through email, but through the shocked whispers of the staff at the preserve. Clara, who was already emotionally exhausted, received a call from Harrison later that evening. Harrison hated making the call, but Elias's orders were absolute. Clara, I am so sorry. He tore up the paperwork. He said, if you don't show up tomorrow, you're out. There was a long silence on the line from Clara's end. Harrison could hear the faint sound of a hospital monitor beeping in the background. I understand, Mr. Harrison, Clara finally said, her voice flat, the sound of the spirit breaking. Tell Mr. Thorne that I won't be in tomorrow. Clara, please. Think about your benefits, your savings. 7 years of service. Can you find a temporary replacement? Maybe a family member? No, Mr. Harrison. My mother is dying. I won't leave her side for a man who considers a human life to be a logistical problem. I accept the termination. And with that, the most critical piece of the Thorne empire, the person who held the threads of Elias's insulated world together, was gone. The next morning, the clock hit 7 a.m., and Clara Ramirez did not walk to the back entrance of the preserve. The chaos was instantaneous, subtle at first, then rapidly escalating. Elias Thorne arrived at the estate from his Manhattan penthouse via helicopter precisely at 8 a.m. He expected his usual morning routine. the specific brand of organic tea brewed, at exactly 185 degrees. The morning papers laid out in order of importance, and the windows already adjusted for optimal natural light. But today, the tea was tepid. The maid who tried to make it, a young girl named Sasha, who usually only handled laundry, had used the wrong kettle and scalded the milk. The papers were scattered haphazardly, and worse, the smart home system was acting up. The temperature in the dining room was 75 degrees, 5 degrees warmer than Elias's mandated setting. Elias, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that looked like it cost more than Sasha's entire education, noticed immediately. "Sasha, what is the meaning of this heat?" he barked, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Sasha stammered, terrified. "I don't know, sir. Ms. Ramirez usually calibrates the system remotely before she even arrives. I tried to find the settings, but I couldn't locate the main panel." Elias glared at the thermostat. It was a minor inconvenience, but in his world, minor inconveniences were acts of anarchy. "Where's Harrison? Get him in here." Harrison was already scrambling. He had spent the morning dealing with a cascade of failures. The kitchen staff had run out of the specific gluten-free bread Elias preferred. The grounds crew had received a memo about adjusting the sprinklers due to the unexpected rain, and the scheduled maintenance of the pool filtration system was canceled because Clara held the key to the maintenance shed, and nobody else knew where the spare was kept. When Harrison finally arrived, looking frazzled, Elias was already pacing. "Harrison, this estate is falling apart. The temperature is unacceptable. The staff is disorganized. I want Ramirez back immediately. Offer her a bonus, whatever it takes. Get her back here before noon." Harrison took a deep breath. "Sir, with respect, that's not possible. She's with her mother, and she accepted the termination. Then hire a replacement." "We tried, sir. The agency says the kind of specialized knowledge Clara possesses, inventory management, bespoke security codes, and familiarity with your specific, unique preferences requires weeks of training. Nobody can step into that role instantly. She was the institutional memory of the preserve." Elias stopped pacing. He stared out the window, looking down on his manicured lawns. He didn't care about Clara. He only cared about the sudden friction in his life. The machine was rattling. "This is an outrage. I run a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and I can't get a decent cup of tea because of one overpaid housekeeper." "Sir, if I may," Harrison started cautiously, deciding this was a moment to introduce the real problem. "When I processed Ms. Ramirez's termination, I had to review the employee conduct protocols, specifically the section concerning long-term, essential staff terminations." Elias waved a dismissive hand. "I don't care about HR regulations, Harrison. Just send her the severance package and move on. It's not standard HR, sir. It's the legacy clause." The air in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees further. Elias froze. The term legacy clause was not something thrown around lightly at Thorne Industries. It was a dusty, rarely invoked set of statutes written into the company charter by Elias's great-grandfather, Sterling Thorne, the man who founded the company on the docks of Boston during the industrial boom. Sterling Thorne was a different breed of industrialist. He believed that the success of the company relied on the absolute loyalty and fair treatment of its oldest, most dedicated employees. He had built in protections, ironclad, legally binding protections that Elias, the modern tech baron, viewed as antiquated nonsense. The legacy clause? Elias scoffed, though there was a slight tremor of recognition in his voice. That ancient, sentimental garbage? I thought we buried that clause years ago. It's completely irrelevant in the age of automation. It's still active, sir. Specifically, Section 3, Subsection B, the Founder's Mandate on Essential Personnel. It states that any termination of an employee with over 5 years of exemplary, uninterrupted service especially if that termination is based solely on a request for compassionate leave during a verifiable family crisis. Requires an automatic, internal review by the Board of Trustees. Elias laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. A review by the board? For firing a maid? Harrison, you are being ridiculous. The board reports to me. Not in this case, sir. That's the key of the legacy clause. It was designed to bypass the immediate CEO if an employee successfully files a complaint based on unfair compassionate grounds. The review is mandatory, non-negotiable, and it triggers a deep dive not only into the termination process, but also into the CEO's overall fulfillment of the duty of care established by Sterling Thorne. Elias stared at Harrison, his composure finally cracking. He had always seen the board as a rubber stamp, a necessary evil. But the legacy clause was a structural flaw, designed to check the absolute power of the CEO, a flaw Elias had always assumed was too obsolete to matter. And what exactly does his duty of care entail? Elias demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Harrison adjusted his tie nervously. It's vague, sir, intentionally so. But historically, it relates to maintaining the ethical integrity of the throne name. If the board finds that the termination was conducted with excessive cruelty or demonstrated a pattern of severe disregard for the welfare of essential staff, the consequences are severe. Be specific, Harrison. What kind of severe? Harrison pulled a small, laminated card from his pocket, the details of which he had been reviewing all morning, dreading this conversation. If the board, by a 2/3 majority, determines the CEO has violated the mandate, they are authorized to invoke a temporary suspension of executive authority, pending a full corporate investigation. Essentially, sir, they can sideline you. They can freeze your decision-making power until review is complete. Elias blinked. The idea of anyone, let alone his own board, challenging his authority was unthinkable. He was Elias Thorne. He didn't get sidelined. He sidelined others. You're telling me that this ancient, ridiculous rule, written by a man in a top hat 100 years ago, gives the board the power to suspend the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar global company because I fired a housekeeper who wanted 2 weeks off? Because you denied legitimate compassionate leave to an essential 7-year employee, sir, and then immediately terminated her when she chose her dying mother over your preference for 41-degree water. Yes, sir, that is exactly what I am telling you. And that was the moment the scale of his mistake began to dawn on Elias. He hadn't just fired a maid. He had activated a corporate nuclear deterrent. He had been so focused on the minor irritation of his domestic schedule that he had completely ignored the catastrophic legal landmine lying beneath his feet. He had dismissed the paperwork, and in doing so, he had dismissed the very foundation of his corporate legacy. Has Clara filed a complaint yet? Elias asked, his voice now tight with forced calm. She hasn't had to, sir. The legacy clause is triggered automatically upon termination if the employee can prove 5 years of service, and the reason for termination was documented compassionate leave denial. The law firm representing Thorne Industries, Miller & Stern. They are legally obligated to notify the board immediately. I received a confirmation email 10 minutes ago. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He hadn't just caused an administrative headache. He had started a corporate war, and the enemy was armed with his own family's history. Get Miller & Stern on the phone, Elias snapped, running a hand through his perfectly sculpted hair. I want to know exactly how we bury this ridiculous clause and make this woman disappear quietly. Offer her $1 million. $2 million. Whatever it takes to get her to sign a non-disclosure agreement and retract any potential complaint. Harrison nodded, pulling out his phone, but he looked deeply skeptical. Sir, with respect, the board is already involved. Money might not solve this. Sterling Thorne's mandate was very clear. This clause is about honor. They are looking for a reason to prove that you, as CEO, maintain the ethical standards of the company's founder. You tearing up her sick leave slip, that's not just a personnel issue. That's a symbol. Elias didn't care about symbols. He cared about power. And right now, he felt his grip on that power starting to loosen. Meanwhile, miles away in a sterile hospital room, Clara Ramirez sat beside her frail mother, holding her hand. She had lost her job, her home security, and her life savings were about to take a massive hit. But she was exactly where she needed to be. She had made a choice, dignity over salary. She had no idea that the simple act of choosing her family had just triggered the biggest corporate crisis in Thorne Industries' history. She had no idea that her former employer, the ruthless Elias Thorne, was now scrambling, terrified that his entire career was about to be undone by the very clause he thought was too archaic to worry about. The Board of Trustees, a collection of old money, legal eagles, and long-term Thorne loyalists, were already gathering. They didn't move fast for quarterly reports, but they moved like lightning when the founder's mandate was invoked. For years, many of them had quietly resented Elias's aggressive, cold-hearted style, viewing him as a spoiled heir who lacked the ethical backbone of his ancestors. This was their chance. This was the moment they could finally put Elias Thorne in his place. The first board member to call Harrison was Eleanor Vance, the eldest and most respected trustee, a woman known for her icy demeanor and impeccable legal knowledge. Harrison, her voice crackled over the secure line, confirmed for me the details of the termination of Miss Clara Ramirez. Harrison nervously recounted the facts. 7 years of service, denial of 2 weeks of compassionate leave, immediate termination. And the reason for the denial? Vance asked. Mr. Thorne stated that her absence would cause operational slippage in his personal residence, sir. There was a heavy silence from Eleanor Vance's end. When she spoke again, her voice was dangerously quiet. Operational slippage. I see. Please inform Mr. Thorne that the Board of Trustees will convene an emergency session in 48 hours to review his conduct under the Legacy Clause. Tell him to prepare a comprehensive defense for his actions. This is not a request. Harrison, this is a mandate. Harrison hung up, sweating profusely. He looked at Elias, who was now barking orders at his legal team over a conference call. Sir, the emergency session is set. 48 hours. Eleanor Vance is leading the charge. Elias slammed his fist on the desk, rattling the expensive art objects displayed there. Vance! That O which has been waiting for an excuse to challenge me for 20 years. Fine, let her come. I built this company into a global powerhouse. They won't dare suspend me over MAID. But the seeds of doubt were already planted. Elias Thorne, who had always commanded the market, suddenly felt like he was losing control of his own narrative. His perfect, flawless world was being dismantled, one small, insignificant piece at a time, all because he couldn't stand the inconvenience of human suffering. The first sign that the corporate world was noticing the tremor came that afternoon. A major investor, hearing whispers of the invoked Legacy Clause, called Elias directly. Elias, what is this nonsense about the founder's mandate? We need stability. We need to know this isn't going to affect the Q4 earnings. It's a minor internal HR issue, Gerald. Just an antiquated rule being misused by a disgruntled employee. It will be resolved with a settlement. A settlement won't fix the optics. Elias. Sterling Thorne built this company on trust. If the board finds you violated the duty of care, it sends a terrible message about your leadership and the stability of the stock. We don't invest in ethically compromised leadership. Elias. Fix this. Now. The investor hung up, leaving Elias facing a screen showing the latest stock ticker. The slight dip that morning wasn't just due to the AI snag. It was the market reacting to the whisper of instability. Elias needed Clara Ramirez to disappear. He needed her silence. He needed the problem, which he had created by ripping up her sick leave, to vanish before the board meeting began. But how do you silence a person who has already lost everything and who now has the ancient power of a corporate charter unexpectedly backing her claim? He looked at Harrison. I need to know everything about Clara Ramirez. Where she lives, her financial situation, her mother's exact medical status. Everything. I need leverage. Find out what she truly wants. Harrison sighed. Sir, I already know what she wants. She wants time with her mother, and she wants basic human respect. The two things you took from her. Then we will offer her everything but those things. Find the price tag, Harrison. We buy our way out of this mess. Elias stood up, walking toward the window, looking out over the city he owned. He was a man used to winning, but this time he wasn't fighting a competitor or a market shift. He was fighting history and a woman's quiet, heartbreaking choice. And history, Elias was about to learn, was a far more powerful opponent than any billionaire could imagine. The clock was ticking down to the board meeting, and the fate of Thorne Industries and Elias's career hung entirely on the shredded remains of one housekeeper's sick leave slip. The clock was ticking down to the board meeting, and Elias Thorne's world, built on flawless precision, was rapidly descending into high-end chaos. The preserve was a mess. The automated irrigation system, which only Clara had the master code for, went haywire and flooded the main geothermal cooling unit, causing a temporary power outage that scrambled the smart home settings completely. Elias's imported Italian coffee machine, a device requiring highly specific calibration, broke down entirely. The new, temporary staff was terrified, hiding in corners and whispering about the curse of Ramirez. Elias didn't see chaos. He saw inefficiency, and he was determined to crush it the only way he knew how, with overwhelming force of capital. He ordered Harrison to deploy the financial artillery. Harrison, already feeling like he was participating in a hostage negotiation, managed to contact Clara's younger sister, Louisa, who was helping manage the hospital vigil. The offer started at a cool $1 million. Louisa relayed the message to Clara, her voice shaking with disbelief. Clara, this is life-changing money. He just wants you to sign a paper saying you won't cooperate with the board. Clara looked at her mother, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. The air in the hospital room was heavy with the smell of oxygen and regret. Clara's response was simple and devastating. Tell her my mother's life is not up for bid, Louisa, and neither is my integrity. The offer escalated quickly. $3 million, a lifetime non-disclosure agreement, and full coverage of all medical expenses. He's offering you enough money to retire. Clara, you can buy a house. Louisa pleaded. Clara shook her head, her gaze fixed on the frail woman in the bed. He is trying to buy my silence, Louisa. My silence means he gets away with treating human beings like disposable assets. I already lost my job. I won't lose my dignity, too. Tell him to keep his millions. Elias was apoplectic when Harrison reported the failure. His money always worked. Always. This was the first time a price tag had failed to fix a problem, and the realization felt like a physical blow. With less than 24 hours left before the emergency session, Elias made the unprecedented decision to handle the negotiation personally. He had to see this woman, this logistical error, face to face. He had to show her the power he wielded. He drove himself into Queens, leaving his security detail and his black car service behind, a massive deviation from his routine. He found a public hospital, a sprawling, dingy building smelling of strong disinfectant and despair, a world away from the sterile, stainless steel perfection of preserve. He walked the halls, his custom-tailored suit looking impossibly out of place against the faded linoleum. He found Clara's room. She was sitting quietly, reading a book of poetry to her sleeping mother. "Ramirez," Elias said, his voice sharp and loud in the quiet room. Clara didn't jump. She just closed the book, marked her place with a finger, and turned, her eyes tired but utterly steady. "Mr. Thorne, I thought you had better things to do than visit the logistical problems of your world." Elias tried to maintain dominance, holding out a thin folder containing the latest financial offer. "I am here to resolve this nonsense. You are jeopardizing the stability of a global corporation over a petty grievance. Sign this agreement. $5 million, tax-free. You walk away, and this board review vanishes." Clara didn't even glance at the folder. "I don't want your money, Mr. Thorne. I wanted 2 weeks. 2 weeks of human consideration. You ripped up my request because my life interfered with your T schedule. You valued a 0.03% market dip more than 7 years of loyalty." She gestured toward her mother. "This is a reality you refuse to acknowledge. You think everything can be optimized. But death and love, Mr. Thorne, they don't fit on a spreadsheet. They are the constants you fail to account for." Elias felt a flash of something unfamiliar, not sympathy, but cold, hard fear. He saw the resolute strength that had made her the perfect housekeeper, now turned against him like a newly sharpened knife. "If you don't sign this, the board will crucify you, and when they're done, I will personally ensure you never work in the city again," Elias threatened, falling back on the instinct of a bully. Clara simply smiled, a sad, weary smile that aged her face by a decade. "I won't work for you again anyway, Mr. Thorne. And you should know this. I didn't file the complaint. I didn't have to. Your own company's rules protected me from you. That is the true legacy of Sterling Thorne." Elias left the hospital empty-handed, the scent of antiseptic clinging to his expensive suit. He finally understood. He couldn't buy his way out because the fight wasn't about money. It was about the fundamental structure of Thorne Industries. He had been outmaneuvered by a dead man's sense of honor. 48 hours after the termination, the board convened in the mahogany-paneled boardroom on the 80th floor of the Thorne Tower. The atmosphere was colder than Elias's mandated dining room temperature. Elias walked in, outwardly confident, flanked by his legal team. He planned to frame the legacy clause as an archaic, fiscally irresponsible measure that threatened shareholder value. Eleanor Vance, the senior trustee, sat at the head of the long table, flanked by the rest of the trustees. She opened the proceedings without preamble. "Mr. Thorne, we are here to review your conduct regarding the termination of Ms. Clara Ramirez. The core issue is a violation of the founder's mandate, the duty of care, specifically concerning the treatment of essential long-term staff." Elias launched into his defense, rehearsed and polished. "This is frivolous. Ms. Ramirez was a non-essential domestic employee. Her absence caused operational disruption in my personal life. My job is to maintain peak corporate efficiency, not manage the emotional demands of every staff member. The market is watching. Suspending me over a housekeeper's sick leave will crash the stock and damage investor confidence globally." Eleanor Vance listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When Elias finished, she ignored his corporate bluster. She motioned to a paralegal, who placed a small, clear, acrylic display case on the table. Inside, carefully preserved and labeled as Exhibit A, were the 8 shredded pieces of Clara Ramirez's sick leave request. "This, gentlemen and ladies," Vance said, her voice slow and resonant, "is the physical evidence. The documents were retrieved from the office waste receptacle by Mr. Harrison and delivered to our legal team. This shredded paper is not merely an administrative error. It is a physical representation of Elias Thorne's disdain for the ethical foundation of this company." She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Elias. Sterling Thorne mandated that loyalty must be rewarded with fairness. Ms. Ramirez provided 7 years of flawless, uninterrupted service. When she requested basic human compassion, Elias Thorne, in a fit of pique over the temperature of his dwelling, deliberately destroyed her request and threatened her livelihood. This is not efficiency. It is cruelty. Cruelty in this company is considered a liability. A younger board member, representing a large institutional investor, chimed in, pointing to the stock ticker displayed on the wall, which showed a steady, if small, decline since the news of the review broke. The market already sees a liability, Elias. The whispers of the legacy clause have caused a 3% dip this morning. Investors fear instability rooted in unethical leadership. Sterling Thorne knew that a company that abuses its loyal employees eventually collapses from the inside. We are not protecting a housekeeper. We are protecting the integrity of the Thorne name, which is the ultimate fiduciary duty to our shareholders. Elias felt the walls closing in. He tried one last time, desperation coloring his voice. I am the CEO. I drive the innovation. This clause is a relic. You cannot sideline me for this. Vance looked at him, her expression glacial. The legacy clause was designed precisely for this moment, Elias. It was designed to ensure that the man at the top never forgets that the foundation of a great company is integrity, not just profit margins. You failed the integrity test when you chose convenience over compassion. You failed your duty of care. She motioned for the vote. It was quick, efficient, and devastatingly clear. 8 votes to 2. Vance struck the gavel with a sharp, final sound that echoed in the luxurious room. Effective immediately, under the authority of Section 3. Subsection B of the Thorne Industries Charter, Elias Thorne is temporarily suspended from all executive duties. A full investigation into his fulfillment of the duty of care and his overall leadership fitness will commence immediately. Mr. Thorne, you are to vacate this building within the hour. Elias Thorne, the titan of industry, stood there, stunned. He had lost his operational control, his power, and his reputation, all over the fate of a piece of shredded paper. He realized, too late, that the cold efficiency he worshipped was no match for the deep, historical roots of honor and loyalty he had so carelessly dismissed. Clara never heard the gavel fall, but she felt the shift. 2 days after the board meeting, a representative from Miller and Stern, the company's law firm, appeared at the hospital, not with a threat, but with a formal settlement offer approved by the interim CEO, Eleanor Vance. The offer was extraordinary. Full severance for 7 years, plus a substantial, non-NDA required settlement equal to 5 years' salary. More importantly, they offered to cover all medical and hospice care for her mother, ensuring she was comfortable until the very end. The package also included a formal, handwritten apology from the Board of Trustees for the egregious error and lack of compassion shown by the previous management. Clara accepted the offer. It wasn't about the money. It was about the recognition of her mother's worth and her own dignity. She had the time she needed, purchased not by Elias's forced millions, but by the integrity of his great-grandfather's mandate. Her mother passed away peacefully 3 days later, with Clara holding her hand, reading the poetry she loved. Elias Thorne's suspension lasted 3 months. The full corporate investigation, spurred by the board, revealed several other instances where he had disregarded staff welfare and ethical concerns in pursuit of absolute efficiency. The board, citing irreparable damage to the company's ethical standing and investor confidence, forced his resignation. He was given a massive golden parachute, but he was permanently removed from any operational control. He became a cautionary tale in business schools, the man who lost an empire over logistical oversight named Clara Ramirez. Clara, however, used the settlement to start a small, highly specialized concierge service for high-net-worth individuals, focusing on discretion and, ironically, human efficiency. She called it the Founder's Mandate Services. She hired staff who understood the balance between professional duty and personal life, and she treated them with the unwavering respect Elias had denied her. Her service quickly became known for its absolute loyalty and flawless execution. The final irony came 6 months after Elias Thorne's downfall. He was living in a chaotic, half-managed luxury apartment in downtown Manhattan, the preserve having become an uninhabitable monument to his failed system. He instructed his new, timid personal assistant to call the highest-rated executive housekeeping service in the city. The assistant reported back, nervous, clutching her phone. "Sir, the best service is called the Founder's Mandate Services. They have a waiting list of 2 years. Who runs it?" Elias demanded, leaning back in his chair, trying to recapture some semblance of authority. "A woman named Clara Ramirez, sir," the assistant whispered. "They are known for their impeccable loyalty, fair treatment of staff, and absolute, flawless efficiency. Their motto is, 'We prioritize the person to perfect the process.'" Elias Thorne sat in his half-managed apartment, staring out at the city he no longer controlled. He realized that Clara hadn't just survived his cruelty. She had taken the very principles he scorned, loyalty and honor, and built a better, stronger empire on them. He had ripped up her sick leave, but in doing so, he had only cleared the path for her true legacy to begin, while ending his own. The ghost in the machine had walked out, and the machine had finally seized up for good.